To the Point. Good morning and welcome to the Point. Kelly Dunn has the day off. I'm Michael Williams. Cities, villages, and towns throughout our region all facing difficult times trying to provide services to taxpayers while tax money is drying up. This morning, we're looking at the issues facing two communities in two counties. Stewart calls itself the sailfish capital of the world, but many know this Martin County city best for its confusion corner. It is symbolic for city leaders dealing with budget shortfalls as they use layoffs and furloughs to navigate their way through tough times as they try to balance their budgets. Wellington is famous for its polo. It's been a village in Palm Beach County for only 15 years, and its financial problems have not been as bad as some other cities and towns, but it's had its share of economic difficulties, too. At times, during the past 3 years, 1/4 of the homes in the community have been in foreclosure. Joining me today are Stewart Mayor Jeff Krauskopf and Wellington Mayor Darrell Bowen. We thank both of you for coming in. And Stewart, you've had a look at layoffs and furloughs in the last few years. And in Wellington, Mayor, you've cut about 25% of staff over the last few years. Give us an overview. Let's start with Stewart first, Mayor, about where you've been and, more importantly, where you see yourself going in terms of your budget in the coming year, which will begin October 1st, and what that'll mean in cuts. Let's start with Stewart.
We've already, over the past 3 years, throttled back as property values have dropped. We got ahead of the curve. We have, through attrition and buyouts and, unfortunately, some layoffs, reduced by about 20 positions, and we are currently under 3 furlough days a year.
How many employees do you have, first of all?
223.
And are you seeing fewer firefighters and police officers on the street because of layoffs or people leaving by attrition, I should say?
No. At this point, we've been able to make most of our cuts without the normal citizen realizing that they've been affected. Although we have cut the recreation department substantially.
How much longer can that last before the citizen begins to feel it, before you go from fat to muscle to bone? And are we looking at that in the budget year coming up?
It depends on how much property values drop. If they continue to drop, that will affect us. And if the state messes around with revenue sharing, if they cut back on revenue sharing, that both of those combined will cause us to take a strict look at the service level. Including police, fire, things like that? We hope not yet, but when 80% of a $19 million budget is payroll, either everybody can take less or some people can decide to leave.
Mayor Bowen, in Wellington, what are you looking for in terms of that property tax revenue? How big a drop are you continuing to look at? Are we at bottom as some hope, or do we have farther to go? What will it mean as you look at your budget in the next year compared to what you've done in the last few years?
Well, we've gone from the height, our budget was about $119 million, and this year we're looking at something just under $75 million. And we think that as far as property taxes, our residential, we think, is pretty much bottomed, but we do still think there's some more reductions in the commercial area. So we don't think we're quite out of it yet, but we think that we're looking more closely at going up now rather than down.
What's it meant to your residents at home, and what will it mean in the coming budget year in terms of perhaps more cutbacks, more belt tightening? How might they see it and feel it?
Well, I don't think our residents have seen much yet. I think the cuts that we've been able to make them so that they're transparent to our residents.
Those primarily involving?
Primarily involving, when we got to what we would call add-on services, which are, our community events and things like that. Those we've had to go out and seek private funding for, but we haven't really had to show them, they haven't been able to see, major cuts so far.
You keep saying so far and not yet. Are we almost getting to the point where so far and not yet are here? And if they are, what might we be anticipating in the coming year?
I echo what Jeff says. I mean, we're kind of at the mercy of our state legislators and our congressmen. I mean, they continue to pass laws that send down unfunded mandates that cost us money that we have no choice with, or they continue to do things to restrict the way we can collect revenue. I can't predict what's going to happen there. If we could predict that, I think we'd be in great. We'd all be in great shape.
You didn't bring your crystal balls today. Go ahead, Mr.
You'll
Mayor.
know 72 hours before sine die.
Right.
That's when you'll know.
In Wellington, in Stewart, is any talk of raising additional revenue through tax increases strictly out of the question and off the table for a long time to come, given the environment we're in? First in Wellington.
I don't think it's completely off the table, but if we did anything with our tax rate, I think it would be minor. We certainly would not even consider exceeding what's called the rollback rate, which is the rate that would give you the same revenue you had the year before. We have continued to look for other sources of income. You know, we look at, again, private donations. We have a lot of user fees in our rec department. I mean, it's user fees funded. So ad valorem taxes are not, you know, the biggest source of income for us, but they're important.
In Stewart, property tax increase this coming year to make ends meet?
We certainly hope not. We'll do everything to avoid it. It depends on how bad the property valuation drop is. If it continues, at some point we may have no choice.
Do you think this year is that year?
Don't know.
How much deeper do you anticipate, based on everything you know now, where you will see property tax rates and property taxable values in the coming budget year?
Because we're the hub and the wheel, we're very commercially oriented.
In Stewart, sure.
Like Darrell, I don't believe commercial has hit the bottom yet. That would, if that goes down another 8%, we hope it wouldn't, but that would cause us to have some real issues.
Real issues defined as?
Whether we choose to continue furloughs or whether we choose to increase taxes a bit. The property valuation is a substantial part of our budget because it's commercial. And then depending on, like Darrell said, what happens with the state.
And that's the great unknown at this point.
We won't know.
Let's talk about pensions. Everybody calls it the time bomb. It's almost become cliche to say that. But in terms of pension and liabilities, where do you see that going? What is the impact in Wellington, for instance, as you look at workers, and then Stewart? And how do we look at that short-term and long-term?
Well, we don't look at it as a major impact in Wellington for a couple of reasons. One is we contract with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office for our police protection, so we don't have police pensions to deal with. And we're part of the Palm Beach County MSTU, or the Special Taxing District, for fire protection, so we don't have anything to say about that. We're only 15 years old, so we don't have a huge backlog of legacies to worry about. But again, I believe that what's going to happen, I think the legislature is going to at least force everybody to make some contributions to their pension plans, which will make it a little easier as we go forward.
In Stewart, Mayor Kraskell?
In Stewart, unfortunately, it cost us our city manager.
Explain for the uninitiated, for those
He made the decision when he looked at what the state was doing that it was probably in his best interest personally to retire.
Meaning, when you say what the state was doing?
What the various bills that have been put forth in pension reform,
including requiring more of a contribution from state workers.
There's some items in there that are even more substantial.
What's it costing you as a city in terms of your pension liabilities?
Ironically, we hope to get some money back because of it, but it'll probably go out in early retirements and numbers that we have to pay for.
Bottom line this for me as we look to the future for our viewers who say, look, I'm interested in what's going on in Stewart and Wellington, which really could be most any municipality. So even though we talk Stewart and Wellington, really the issues you're dealing with, you could name the city in our great broad region and say they're dealing with the same things. Bottom line this for people who are interested but don't follow government every day. First in Stewart, what do you say to residents about what they have to anticipate about the quality of life and about services going forward for the next 2 to 5 years?
2 to 5 years. Let's hope that it has hit bottom. Let's hope that all of our friends from the north continue to come down to bolster our sales tax and keep our sales tax up and our sharing of the state sales tax up. And if we have to make any more cuts, we'll do the best to maintain our highest level of service.
Mayor Bowen, you said to me you came to office 3 years ago. You were in business before that, had never been in political life. You thought there was a lot of fat to cut. Have you cut all the fat? Where are you now? And are you a convert to the fact that right now we need some help from somewhere because there's nothing left really to cut?
Well, I think we've reached the muscle with our cutting. But I think that, I think we can look up, because the economy will turn. I mean, business will get going again. It always does, even in spite of government. It will continue to succeed, and it'll go back up. And as it does, that will help us, the sales tax revenue, as Jeff says, and I think that property values will finally stabilize. But some of the things that we're going to continue to do to help us over the next 3 to 5 years is we've got a program where we try to, when we have foreclosed homes and vacant homes, we try to take care of them a little bit ourselves to keep the values up in those communities. And we also are working very hard to create some jobs which would broaden our tax base and make us more sustainable.
The foreclosure crisis still remains front and center in terms of your headaches for budgets in the city and the decline in property values?
Well, there's no question. Foreclosures are a problem because we, as you said at the beginning of the show, we've estimated that 20 to 25% of our homes have either been in foreclosure or are in foreclosure. So it's a problem, and when one is left vacant and the grass grows up, I mean, we as a city have stepped in now and said we'll clean it up and we'll maintain it, and sometimes we get the money back after the foreclosure, but the main thing is it helps stabilize the neighborhood and doesn't allow the neighborhood to go down further.
Mayor Krauskopf, and briefly, and pick up on your thought, but briefly in summation, both you as elected officials and your constituents have many more tough decisions ahead about what level of services they're willing to deal with vis-a-vis the tax base and community, and what they're willing to take out of their pocket for taxes, because we're not out of the woods yet. A lot more tough choices ahead.
We are. We're not out of the woods yet.
Mayor Krauskopf from Stewart, we thank you for taking
you're welcome.
Time to join us. I know you're headed back to your hot seat in Stewart. Mayor Bowen in Wellington, we thank you for giving us a perspective from the city point of view. Thanks for being with us on To The Point.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up next, our roundtable looks at some of the political issues along the lines of what we just spoke about. We'll be back in just a moment. Please stay with us. Now for our roundtable with Brian Crowley, author of the Crowley Political Report, and Bill DiPaolo from the Palm Beach Post, who covers North Palm Beach County. Gentlemen, we thank you for coming in. You heard what two political leaders had to say. They're on hot seats these days. Bill, as you look at northern Palm Beach County and really expand that view regionally, what are we looking at in terms of budgets and headaches as we move on to the year? We've already seen some cities making tough choices. Kind of give us a thumbnail of where you see things right now on the budget picture and what it's going to mean to residents and the tough choices ahead.
Well, as the two mayors said, the politicians in the northern communities that I cover, they're looking under every rock they can to find places to cut. Jupiter and Palm Beach Gardens have cut several dozen employees from their payroll. Palm Beach Gardens used to meet once a month. Now they're once every 2 weeks. Now they're meeting only once a month to try to save some money. They're looking at furloughs, which is another way they could cut, which a lot of employees are not too happy about furloughs because they know what it really is a pay cut.
Are constituents feeling the service cuts, and if they are, where, and is there an outcry that you've seen a real groundswell there yet, or are people saying, no, I understand it, I don't want my taxes to go up, so I'll live with it? What's your sense?
What I'm seeing is people are willing to withstand the cuts as they are right now. You know, people, I think, are so nervous about keeping their homes, nervous about keeping their jobs. The last thing they want to do is spend more money. You know, they walk down their neighborhoods, they say, oh, that guy's getting foreclosed on, that guy's getting foreclosed on. So I think they're willing to put up with it right now. But, you know, they have not yet cut police and fire. Once they start cutting police and fire, you might see a different attitude from the public.
You see that in budgets coming into the fall? And I know that's a bit of a crystal ball because we don't know the final lay of the land.
It's kind of like the third rail for politicians. You know, they're so afraid to cut police and fire, but it's getting to the point that they're probably going to have to fairly soon.
Although, if you look at what happened in West Palm Beach when Lois Frankel took on the police union, there was a lot of popular support for opposing the police union, which was a first, really.
And Brian, that brings up the political part of that equation, and I want both of you to talk about it. Being in a mayor's seat, being in an administrator's seat, any elected official's seat, I mean, you talk about hot seat, you really are. So navigating that political versus economic equation, how does that play out, and how do you see political leadership dealing with that right now as you kind of look at the long view?
Well, this is a difficult period for political leaders that have to deal with taxes, and as these two mayors spoke about, you know, you listen carefully, and they talk about not raising taxes, but they talk about
looking open
possibly, but they also talk about user fees, which anybody else considers to be a tax. So they're looking at ways of raising money, but it's you know, as Bill was saying, I mean, people are willing to go along with a certain level of cuts, but at a certain point, people may say it's too much. But right now, politically, raising taxes is still a very dicey thing to do.
Bill, though, if there is any silver lining, well, first let me ask, is there? It would seem if you're not going to raise taxes, what you've got to hope to do is increase the revenue base. I mean, do you see any positives in that sense?
Well, Yeah, one thing that I've noticed in the communities I cover is that there's a much more aggressive attitude towards bringing businesses to their communities. You probably read in the Palm Beach Post last week, the Chromalloy Corporation is going to move from their headquarters up in New York down to Palm Beach Gardens. We all know about the Scripps property. You know, the Briga Tract is coming online now. The communities are becoming very, very aggressive because they know if they can attract more business to their cities, that's going to result in more property taxes. More people will come here, they'll open businesses, they'll go to restaurants, they'll buy automobiles. So that will increase their tax base.
Is that an easier sell given the recession we're coming out of and a lot of the other issues here, and tough to get credit and get a new home and attract the kind of workers you want to have to start that business? But are you starting to see some change there for the positive that's making that an easier sell above and beyond the businesses you just named?
Yeah, well, realtors are saying that, you know, now that the property values have come back to earth here in Florida, Florida is an easier sell now.
Right.
You know, and so corporations around the country and around the world are probably looking at South Florida again.
Saying it's affordable again for the middle-class
Maybe
workers.
We should start. Maybe we can move our headquarters.
And what's
down
the
there.
trade-off, in your view, with these communities also offering big tax breaks to these businesses? Because the businesses are coming in, but they're not collecting any tax money.
Right. You're absolutely right, Brian. Both Palm Beach County and Palm Beach Gardens chipped in about $300,000 to attract Chromalloy down. And we all know the millions of dollars that was spent to attract Scripps down here. And that's tough to sell to the public right now.
But you're hoping for that long-term investment payoff, a discussion to be continued. Gentlemen are going to stay right with us. We've got more to talk about with politics. Coming up next, how's the Tea Party doing locally and nationally? Speaking of taxes and the picture about where we go from here. We'll be right back with that and more. Stay with us. A new national poll is out about the Tea Party. The CNN Opinion Research Survey found 47% of Americans have a, quote, unfavorable view of the movement. Throughout most of last year, that number was typically in the high 30s or low 40s. The favorable rating also dropped 5 points since December, down to 32%. But just a week ago, an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 people showed up for a Tea Party rally in Vero Beach. Is this a case where Florida may not reflect the national mood? Senator Marco Rubio enjoyed a huge boost from the party, the Tea Party that is, and the Senate campaign says he's going to look to them to support his newest proposal, raising possibly the retirement age for future Social Security recipients. He makes it clear it would involve people decades away from retirement. Is that an issue that's going to fly in Florida? Brian Crowley, kind of weave all of that together, the Tea Party popularity or unpopularity depending on the poll. Marco Rubio talking about starting to use some of that political capital to make tough choices. Give us a feel.
There's a wide streak of independence among a certain segment of Florida voters. If you go back to 1992, when Ross Perot became active with the Reform Party movement, very early on, Florida was one of the first states to aggressively support Ross Perot. And when that election was over, he got 20% of the vote in Florida. And that, you know, that core group of people are nearly identical to the kind of people that are adapted to the Tea Party. And the Tea Party has been very successful in Florida. I think the national poll results are interesting in the sense that the downside of the Tea Party is they may be too rigid for some voters. At some point, folks just want stuff to get done. And I think, at least in recent months, the Tea Party has appeared to be almost too rigid, and you can see this in Washington. It's interesting that Senator Marco Rubio, who became a Florida senator largely because of the Tea Party, seems to be now going back to his Tea Party roots.
Briefly from both of you, Bill, to begin, you used to never talk in politics about anything in terms of changes to Social Security. Now the senator, in an op-ed, and he's making the national round, says, listen, we've got to look at raising the age for future recipients. We've got to make tough choices. Both of you respond to that. How will that play in Florida? How will it play nationally for the senator?
Well, it's certainly going to be a tough call for him. I mean, you know, because he's going to get pulled in both directions.
And he's acknowledged that.
Right. And I think we're really going to find out how slick of a politician he is because, you know, it's going to be a tough issue.
Well, I actually think raising the age could sell. We've already done it. Some decades ago, we raised the age from 65 progressively to 67, I believe the age is. So I think a lot of people could support raising the age because it's supposed to happen a long time from now.
Well, we'll see. The debates are going to be hot and heavy as we look at the debt crisis in the country and the debt crises at home, as we've seen. We'll be back with more in just a moment. All right, we have a moment for a quick Crowley closer. Your view on the events of the week.
Well, the most interesting event of the week may be the speculation by Crowley Political Report. Will Jeb Bush run for the U.S. Senate against Bill Nelson? You decide.
All right. We shall see. We'll leave you with that tidbit. Bill DiPaolo, Palm Beach Post, Brian Crowley, we thank you very much for being with us. And as always, we thank you for spending time with us on today's To The Point. And if you'd like to send us a comment about today's broadcast, go to WPTV.com and click on the political link. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great week.